In the Huddle was created to give student athletes, parents and coaches an inside look at the journey through US college sport and all that comes with it. The demands, the experiences, the excitement and the opportunities available to our student athletes from around the world. Study and Play USA facilitates a comprehensive, customised approach for student athletes and families for their whole journey, from their high school preparation years right through to US college graduation. Hi listeners, welcome to this episode of In the Huddle. It's a quicker one today. Just wanted to touch on some very important matters, and this podcast is directed at Year 12 students here in Australia and parents of Year 12 students. And it's about this time every year that we do get phone calls from parents and emails and phone calls from students who are a little bit concerned about where they're at along the pathway. They've got some uncertainty around what next year might look like. They've got the added stresses of their ATAR and their final exams approaching and school commitments and things like that. So we thought it was timely to provide some information about this and how we can help. And it really starts by just acknowledging what are some of the key stress points that we hear about, and also what are some of the key things that about this pathway and the timeline that can actually relieve a lot of pressure and stress for students in Year 12 right now. So look, I'm excited to talk about this because I think it's something we talk about every year with different families. Now that we've got this podcast opportunity, it's great to be able to reach a lot of people who may identify with some of these stress points we can talk about. So without any further ado, I'll just jump into it. So look, the first thing I want to say is this is all perfectly normal. If you're out there worried about, oh, gee, if I got my scholarship for next year yet, I've got all these exams coming up. I've got coaches in America contacting me. I'm getting pulled in all sorts of different directions. First and foremost, this is perfectly normal. And I also want to say that every one of our student athletes that's in America, and there are hundreds of them, have all been through this and come out the other side, and they're thriving in the USA. So it's temporary, but I'm going to give you some tools today to help you get through these next few months without, at least minimizing some stress. Okay, so look, certainly the main key stress point we hear stems around this idea that teenagers by nature will tend to compare themselves to others. And when you're in the Australian system, most Australian students are planning next year. They're all talking about next year in the lunch hour at school. Everyone's talking about ATAR or final exams and what you're going to get, what you're going to study at university. If you're on the US college pathway, this can be quite uncertain at this point because we're working on two different timelines. So we've got two timelines colliding here. We've got the timeline of an Australian high school student preparing to go to university here in Australia, and we've got an Australian student preparing to go to the college system. Okay, so when the decision is made to go to choose college in America is quite different to what college or course you're going to get into here in Australia. So it is possible that you've got friends and peers here in Australia that have made the decision. They know what university they're going to, they know what they want to study, and you don't. And that's okay. All right, it is perfectly normal because it's just a bit of a timeline matter. So it's a matter of just acknowledging that, being aware of it, not getting bogged down by that. Okay. The second thing we see a lot is that, and I sort of touched on it at the start, is that you are getting pulled in a lot of different directions in Year 12. You've got obviously your school itself. You've got within school each subject asking lots of things of you and assignments and assessments and exams. You might have leadership roles within school that you've got to attend to. You've got social commitments, you've got family commitments, and of course if you're on this pathway you've got sporting commitments. So there's a lot going on, and I guess if we add to that, you've got milestones, you've got formals, you've got your final graduation, valedictory, lunches, dinners. There's things going on at school, particularly in this second half, and it can be a little bit all consuming and overwhelming. Again, this is all perfectly normal. And if you're on the US college pathway, you'll be okay. Okay. So, And the third thing I think, and this is probably the most important in my opinion, because there's not a lot of people who probably realize the differences between the US education system and ours. And if we understand it, it should relieve a heck of a lot of stress. So look, what I'm about to say, I'm coming from, where I'm coming from here is as a former teacher, an educator, and I was heavily involved in pastoral care. So I very much understand the Australian high school system. However, I also obviously help student athletes get into the US system on a daily basis. So they are very different systems, and I think it's very important to acknowledge that. So for example, in our system right now, if you're in year 12 in Australia, our system's going to ask you, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to study at university? Put your preferences in. And then the idea is at the end of this year, you're going to either get accepted or not into your ideal course. So everything we're trying to do with our ATAR is to try and get into a specific course at a specific university. That's our system. And that's fine. We live in a great country with a very good education system and perfectly great, universities. But it's different in America. So what we're trying to do to qualify for America is qualify for the system. We're not trying to get into a specific course, which means we don't need to be doing specific subjects and prerequisites to get into college in university. Yes, there are some core subjects they want you to do to qualify as an athlete, but it is a very, very different system. So what we need to do really is be good enough to get into the system. Okay, first, to be qualified to be a student in America. And we do that by SAT exams. And they also do that by looking at year 9, 10, 11, and 12 results. Okay, so it's a very, very interesting point, because you're in ATAR now, or you're in your final year, whether it's HSC or whatever it's called in your particular state. What you've done right now, up until now, you've done probably more than 75% of what is necessary to get into college in the US system. It's quite flipped in the Australian system, where a lot does fall on what happens in year 12. Okay, so just by knowing that right off the top, that should relieve a lot of stress. ATAR is all about getting into the Australian system. It's an Australian tertiary entrance number. So it's a very big distinction to make there. So you've already done so much. So ATAR, my point here is ATAR is important. Of course it is. You're paying good money at good schools to get a good ATAR, and you should always keep your options open to study here in Australia. That I'm a big believer in that. However, if you are committed to the college pathway, you can park some of the stress that maybe some of your peers are experiencing in getting ready for this, dark cloud that I call HSC if you're in New South Wales, or your ATAR final examinations. Okay, so again, getting into the US system, you need to be good enough. And so, for example, if you get into the college system in America, there's no real difference between a 78 ATAR and a 98 if you get into that university. Okay, so if a 78 student gets in as a 98 and a 98, look, the 98 ATAR student may well get some additional academic scholarship, which can be very valuable. However, that's not going to limit the 78 ATAR from studying whatever they like, whenever they like. So you don't need to know what you're studying in your first year or your second year. You can take those years to taste test different subjects, and there is no rush or pressure to know exactly what you want to study. Now, we have girls and boys in year 12 sitting in our office each year that have been quite emotional and quite clearly relieved when we tell them this, because it's they just don't know what they want to study. And in my experience, well over 50% of students do not exactly know what they want to study when they finish year 12. But that's what our system in Australia, in a way forces us to know. Okay, so going into the US system, you can park quite a lot of this stress. Okay, so it's some good news, I suppose, with that. So I want to reiterate the point that, if you're in year 12 right now, you have done most of what's necessary to get into college. Okay, assuming you've done an SAT already. you've done the most of what you need to do. I just want to quickly bring up the Michael Zhang example. Some of you may have heard of Michael. Some of you may know Michael Zhang listening to this podcast. Michael's a Sydney lad, school captain of his school, perfect score on the SAT exam, a very, very high achieving student. And some of you quite rightly can say, well, look, he's probably one out of the box. We can't all be blessed with those academic or his academic abilities. So, you know, but I guess what we can learn from Michael is the way he approached his year 12 year. Now, he put a lot of energy because he realized to get into Harvard and some of these bigger universities, SAT was king. So he focused very hard on doing multiple SAT exams and trying to improve that each time. Okay, for those that don't know, you can do that. So, you know, they will take your best score when reviewing your SAT. So that's a fantastic thing. So look, there's a 3-hour focus or a 3-hour exam as opposed to being really concerned about, you know, this full year of ATAR. And then really they are reviewed quite evenly. So, you know, SAT is important, and that's not to stress you. That should de-stress a lot of families there knowing that as well. This is a test that you can take as many times as you want or need. We have tutoring available. Michael himself is doing tutoring if anyone is interested in or needs that extra support. So again, reiterating the point that what is happening in year 12 this year, if you're feeling stressed about that, it's perfectly normal and it's okay. You've done a lot of the work already. So I think just to be really positive about it is in year 12, try and use year 12 as a dress rehearsal for college for year 1. Okay, so your first year in college, you'll get free tutoring, whether you want it or need it, you'll get it. You're going to have a very, very structured day, okay, between sport and study. We don't have that in Australia, typically. We are not designed to balance sport and study in our high school system, unless it's a specific school who does that, okay? But it's not many. Most schools don't do that and provide for that. So believe it or not, your first year in college will be easier, okay, than year 11 and 12. So we just got to get through this year, enjoy the year, do your very best. ATAR is important, yes. It is not as important for this pathway as it is for someone going to university here in Australia. Stay the course. You've got to maintain good communication with coaches through this period. If you haven't heard from coaches from a while, keep in touch with them. Communication is what can get you scholarships, and you just don't know when a coach is ready to make that offer. Okay, so best to stay in front of them. Keep updating them with any updates. It can be an update on an improved SAT score. It can be an update to let them know you've got exams coming up, and after that you've got some competition you're going to be able to compete with. Okay, so or compete in. Sorry, just keeping in touch. Keep this process going. Some people, because of the stress of year 12, because of the pressures that they're under, will put this process of going to college next year on hold, and it's a mistake, because this is what's necessary. To get a good outcome, you do need to be engaged. We can't put this on hold. So we're doing our best to support you on this end, and it's very important that you keep that communication going with coaches if you've got that existing communication happening. So stay the course, trust the process, trust the journey, try and enjoy it, try and enjoy those milestones in grade 12. Do your very best. Don't put your rackets or your golf clubs or your soccer boots away. You've really got to keep playing as much sport as possible. Look, I'm a big believer, and that's very good for our mental health anyway, to stay nice and fit and active. But the other side of that is coaches want to see that you are still competing. You don't have to be winning. You don't have to be at your best. But if you're not competing at all, there'll be concerns from them on that end that you might struggle to balance that study and sport when you get to college. So it's great to be able to demonstrate that you are a student always and an athlete always, because that's what's going to be required at college. So look, we're here to help. We hope this podcast has been helpful for you. Any questions that any students have for us, we're more than happy to jump on the phone and have a conversation or have a chat face-to-face on Zoom, and likewise with parents. So look, as I said, hope that's been helpful, and we look forward to hearing from some of you, and wish you the best for the remainder of, what's a fast approaching end to the year.